Commander Kale of the Vorthok Empire stood perfectly still in the massive briefing chamber. The red lights cast dark shadows across his battle-scarred face. His reptilian skin, covered in metallic scales, reflected the crimson glow like polished armor. Around him, 50 other warriors waited in silence, their breathing creating a low hum in the vast room. General Vox stepped forward, his massive frame towering over everyone else. His 4 yellow eyes moved slowly across the assembled soldiers, each gaze feeling like a scanner analyzing their worth. The general's voice boomed through the chamber like thunder. Warriors of the Vorthok Empire, today we face a new enemy. The human sector has rejected our final offer of surrender. Dare to defy the might of our empire. Kale's mandibles clicked together twice, a sign of respect in Vorthok culture. Behind him, other warriors made similar sounds, creating a symphony of clicking that echoed off the metal walls. Our intelligence division has studied these humans for months, Vox continued, activating a holographic display. The image showed a small blue planet rotating slowly in space. They call their world Earth. Our reports indicate they are nothing more than primitive creatures who recently learned to travel between stars. The hologram shifted to show human spacecraft. The ships looked clunky and awkward compared to the sleek Vorthok vessels. Their hulls were covered in strange markings and appeared to be held together with basic metal plating. Tech. Look at their pathetic technology, Vox sneered. While we have mastered plasma weaponry that can melt through solid titanium, these humans still use projectile weapons. Bullets and missiles, like ancient cave dwellers, throwing rocks. Several warriors laughed at this comparison. Kale remained silent, but his mind was already calculating battle strategies. After 17 successful conquests, he had learned to never underestimate any enemy, no matter how weak they appeared. Commander Kale, General Vox's voice cut through the room like a blade. You will lead Strike Force Talon in this operation. Your target is Earth's primary population centers. Intelligence suggests their military lacks proper organization and discipline. Kale stepped forward, his boots clicking against the metal floor. What are our expected casualties, General? Minimal Vox replied with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. Our battle computers estimate a 95% probability of complete victory within 3 rotations. The humans have never faced an enemy like us. The hologram now showed detailed scans of human military bases. Soldiers in simple uniforms carried basic weapons. Their vehicles looked primitive compared to Vorthok hover tanks and plasma artillery. These creatures have only been in space for a few decades, Vox explained. They fight among themselves constantly, wasting resources on petty conflicts. They have no unified command structure, no advanced weapons, no real understanding of interstellar warfare. Kale studied the tactical data flowing across multiple screens. Human population centers were densely packed, their cities sprawling across continents. Their defense satellites were basic communication arrays, not weapons platforms, sir. What about their space fleet? Asked Subcommander Thex, a young warrior earning his first major command. Laughable, Vox replied. 37 vessels total. Most of them cargo ships converted for military use. Their fastest ships can barely reach half the speed of our slowest fighters. The briefing continued for another hour, covering supply lines, communication protocols, and extraction procedures. Kale memorized every detail, though the mission seemed almost insultingly simple. The Vorthok Empire had crushed civilizations with technology far more advanced than these humans possessed. As the briefing ended, warriors began filing out toward the hangar bays. Kale lingered, studying the holographic display one final time. Something about the human cities caught his attention, the way they were built, spreading outward like living organisms rather than the rigid geometric patterns of most civilized worlds. Commander, General Vox approached him. Seemed concerned about facing such weak opponents. Not concerned, sir. Curious. In my experience, species that survive long enough to reach space usually possess some hidden strength. Vox's 4 eyes narrowed. These humans have no hidden strength. They are divided, chaotic, and technologically inferior. Do not overthink this assignment, Commander. It is simply another planet to add to our empire. 3 hours later, Kale stood, On the command bridge of his flagship, the Shadow Blade. The massive vessel cut through space like a dark arrow, its hull absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. Entering Sol System Commander, reported his navigation officer. Through the main view screen, Kale watched Earth grow larger. The planet looked deceptively peaceful. Its blue oceans and white clouds creating a beautiful marble against the black of space. No massive orbital defense platforms, no fleets of warships rushing to intercept them. Scan for military installations, Kale ordered, detecting multiple ground bases, sir. No significant space defenses. Their largest vessels are currently docked at what appears to be a civilian space station. Kale reviewed the incoming data on his personal display. Everything matched the intelligence reports perfectly. Human technology was indeed primitive. Their military spread thin across the planet's surface. Their weapons were kinetic projectile systems that would be useless against Vorthok armor. Easy prey, he muttered under his breath, watching Earth's Terminator lines slowly rotate toward them. Soon the sun would rise over the human cities, and with it would come the shadow of the Vorthok Empire. What Commander Kale didn't know was that far below on Earth's surface, early warning systems had already detected his fleet. In command centers across the planet, humans named June Hannah Tay. Thousands of others were preparing for a fight that would change everything both species thought they knew about war. The first rays of sunlight painted the sky orange over Sol when Commander Kale's attack fleet descended from the clouds. His Shadow Blade led 27 Vorthok fighters in perfect formation, their dark hulls gleaming like beetles against the morning light. Below them, the sprawling city stretched for miles, filled with millions of humans who had no idea their world was about to change forever. Begin Phase 1, Kale commanded into his communicator. Target military installations first, then civilian infrastructure. His pilots acknowledged with sharp clicks. The plan was simple. Shock and awe, followed by swift occupation. Every previous conquest had followed this pattern. First, destroy their ability to fight back, then crush their spirit. Fighters spread out over the city, their plasma cannons charging with an ominous blue glow. Kale watched the tactical display, expecting to see human aircraft fleeing in panic. Instead, his sensors detected something impossible. 12 human fighters were climbing directly toward them at incredible speed. Sir, his weapons officer called out. Human aircraft approaching from multiple vectors. They're moving faster than our intelligence predicted, Kale frowned. The tactical reports had shown human fighters as slow, lumbering machines. But these craft were screaming through the atmosphere like rockets, leaving white contrails behind them as they climbed. Engage targets, Kale ordered. Confident his advanced weaponry would make quick work of the primitive human machines. The lead human fighter, its hull painted with the words Iron Eagle, suddenly performed a maneuver that made Kale's blood freeze. The craft flipped completely upside down, dove straight down for 3 seconds, then pulled up into a spiraling climb that brought it directly behind one of his fighters. Impossible, Kale hissed, watching his instruments. The human pilot had just pulled 12 Gs of force, enough to turn a Vorthok warrior into paste. The Iron Eagle's pilot, human named Captain Seek, fired a volley of missiles that struck the Vorthok fighter's engines. The alien craft exploded in a brilliant flash, its debris raining down over the city below. How are they surviving those forces? Kale demanded, but his science officer had no answer. What they didn't know was that humans had been pushing the limits of G-force tolerance for decades. Their pilots trained in centrifuges, their bodies conditioned to handle pressures that would kill most other species. Captain Seek and his squadron had been selected specifically for their ability to fly maneuvers that defied physics. The aerial battle became a nightmare for the Vorthok forces. Human fighters twisted and turned through the sky like angry hornets, their pilots somehow staying conscious through turns that should have been fatal. One human pilot, Calcine Thunderdragon, actually flew his damaged fighter upside down for 2 full minutes while targeting a Vorthok bomber. All units descend to ground level, Kale ordered, his voice strained. Begin surface operations. Immediately, its remaining fighters dropped toward the city, their landing troops deploying across multiple districts. surely the ground battle would be different. Humans couldn't possibly have adapted their ground forces to match this insane aerial performance. He was wrong again. Kale watched through his tactical display as Vorthok ground forces met human resistance. Instead of organized military units, they faced something far more dangerous. Humans who refused to fight by any rules in the Gangnam district. A human soldier named June had commandeered a construction crane. While Vorthok troops advanced down the main street, June used the crane to drop concrete barriers directly onto their vehicles. When the aliens tried to target him, he swung the crane's arm like a massive club, smashing to Vorthok hover tanks against a building. Tactical report, Kale barked into his communicator. Sir, the humans are using civilian equipment as weapons. They're turning every piece of machinery into a tool of war. Near the Han River, a human engineer named Hannah had converted a subway construction tunnel into a fortress. She and her team had rigged the entire underground passage with explosives, turning it into a deadly trap. When Vorthok forces tried to use the tunnel to avoid surface resistance, Hannah triggered the charges, collapsing 3 city blocks onto the alien invaders. But the most shocking sight was a human maintenance worker named Tay. He had taken a simple repair drone, a small flying machine meant for fixing building facades, and loaded it with explosives. The tiny drone zipped between Vorthok lines, too small and fast for their weapons to track, delivering devastating attacks to their rear positions. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're losing contact with multiple ground units. Humans are coordinating attacks across the entire city. Kale expected the next phase, civilian panic. In every previous conquest, terrified civilians had fled in chaos, making occupation simple. But as he watched the tactical display, he witnessed something that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. The humans were evacuating, but not in panic. They moved in organized streams like water flowing through carefully planned channels. Traffic moved smoothly despite the battle raging overhead. Emergency services worked with military precision, clearing hospitals and schools while maintaining supply lines to their fighting forces. Most incredible of all was an elderly woman the humans called Grandmother Park. Instead of fleeing, she had set up a coordination center in an abandoned department store. From there, she directed civilian volunteers who were delivering ammunition, medical supplies, and food to human fighting positions across the city. Target the civilian coordination center, Kale ordered, his voice tight with frustration. It's surrounded by a children's hospital and a refugee shelter. Our targeting systems cannot engage without massive civilian casualties. Kale slammed his fist against his command console. The humans had somehow positioned their resistance to make every target morally impossible to attack. They weren't just fighting, they were thinking 3 steps ahead of every move his forces made as the sun began to set over Seoul. Painting the smoke-filled sky deep red, Kale reviewed his tactical reports. His 3-rotation mission had not only stalled, it had turned into a disaster. Half his ground forces were trapped in urban warfare they couldn't win. Its air superiority was gone, and the humans showed no signs of surrender. Sir, his tactical officer reported quietly, we're receiving similar reports from the other invasion sites. New York, London, Tokyo, all ground operations have stalled. The humans are fighting back everywhere. Kale stared at the view screen, watching human fighters. Still darting between his remaining ships like angry wasps, Captain Seek's Iron Eagle had been joined by a dozen more human craft, all of them flying impossible maneuvers against his technologically superior forces. For the first time in his military career, Commander Kale began to understand that his empire had made a terrible mistake. These humans weren't primitive prey, they were something far more dangerous. They were survivors who had learned to turn every sea's disadvantage into a weapon. The human military base sat like a fortress on the outskirts of Busan, its concrete walls scarred by plasma fire. Commander Kale led his assault team through the smoking ruins of the outer defenses, his scaled armor gleaming with alien technology. After 3 days of failed attacks across Earth, he had decided to take direct action. Breach the main gate, he ordered his warriors, raising his plasma rifle. The weapon hummed with deadly energy, capable of melting through solid steel in seconds. His team moved forward in perfect formation, their reptilian forms cutting through the morning fog like ghostly predators. The base seemed quiet, too quiet. Kale's tactical scanner showed minimal life signs, but something felt wrong. "Sir, this seems too easy," whispered Subcommander Thex, his voice crackling through the comm system. Kale was about to respond when the ground beneath them exploded. Human. Soldiers erupted from hidden tunnels, their faces painted with mud and determination. They moved with practiced coordination, firing their primitive kinetic weapons in disciplined volleys. But these weren't the panicked shots of desperate civilians. These were the precise attacks of trained warriors. "Take cover," Kale shouted, diving behind a destroyed vehicle as bullets sparked off his armor. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Kale's plasma weapons cut through concrete and metal, but the humans seemed to anticipate every move. They used the terrain like old friends, disappearing into shadows and emerging where least expected. A human soldier named Day had been watching Kale from a hidden position above. While the Vorthok commander focused on the frontal assault, Day dropped silently from a damaged rooftop, landing directly behind the alien leader. The impact sent both fighters crashing to the ground. Kale's superior strength should have ended the fight quickly, but Day fought with a desperation that matched his skill. The human soldier wrapped his arms around Kale's throat, applying a chokehold that cut off the alien's air supply. "You chose the wrong planet," Day grunted, his muscles straining against Kale's attempts to break free. Kale thrashed wildly, his claws scraping against the human's protective gear. In the struggle, Day's sidearm discharged, the bullet tearing through Kale's armor and piercing his primary heart. The Vorthok commander's vision blurred as purple blood flowed from the wound. "Medical. We need medical here," Day shouted, his voice filled with unexpected concern as Kale collapsed. The last thing Kale remembered was the strange sight of his enemy calling for help to save his life. When consciousness returned, Kale found himself in a clean white room, filled with the scent of antiseptic. Machines beeped softly around him, monitoring his vital signs. Through the haze of pain medication, he saw two humans in white coats working at a nearby station. Dr. Young, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, noticed he was awake and approached his bed. Her movements were gentle, professional. Behind her, Dr. Sue prepared medical instruments with the same careful precision Kale had seen in Vorthok surgeons. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Young asked, checking the monitors connected to his body. Kale tried to speak, but his throat felt raw. The bullet had missed his primary heart by millimeters. Any closer and he would have died on that battlefield. "Why?" He finally managed to whisper, the word coming out as a painful rasp. Dr. Young tilted her head, genuinely confused. "Why what?" "Save me. I am your enemy." She smiled sadly, adjusting the IV drip that was feeding healing compounds into his bloodstream. "Because you're hurt? That's what we do here. We heal people who are hurt." The simplicity of her answer hit Kale like a physical blow. In Vorthok culture, enemies were either killed or enslaved. The concept of healing someone who had just tried to kill you was completely alien to his understanding. Over the following days, as his body slowly healed, Kale observed human culture with growing fascination. The medical facility was decorated with artwork that told stories of human history. Paintings showed people rising from the rubble of destroyed cities, their faces filled with hope, despite overwhelming tragedy. A sculpture near the window depicted humans of different races linking hands, their bronze faces turned toward the sky. The inscription read, "Together we rise." Nurse Yoon, a young woman with a gentle smile, brought him books to read during his recovery. The stories were unlike anything in Vorthok literature. They told of ordinary people facing impossible odds, farmers fighting dragons, students overthrowing tyrants, children saving entire worlds through courage and determination. "Your people enjoy stories about weakness, defeating strength," Kale observed one afternoon, as Yoon changed his bandages. "Not weakness," she corrected, her hands steady as she worked. "We enjoy stories about the strength that comes from having Something worth fighting for. One evening, as purple twilight painted the sky beyond his window, Cale heard something that changed his understanding of humans forever. Music drifted through the medical wing, a song performed by someone the staff called Jin. The melody was haunting, filled with both sorrow and hope. As the song continued, Cale watched something remarkable happen. Human soldiers in the corridor. Men and women who had fought against his forces just days before began to weep openly. These weren't tears of weakness, but of connection to something deeper than individual survival. The song told the story of a mother who had lost her children in a war, but who continued to care for other people's children as if they were her own. It spoke of love that transcended death, of sacrifice that created meaning from suffering. Why does this music affect them so strongly? Cale asked Dr. Young, who had paused in her rounds to listen. "'Cause it reminds us why we fight," she replied, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We don't fight to conquer or to prove our strength. We fight to protect what we love." Cale watched a wounded human soldier named Corporal Kim, comforting a younger man who had lost his unit in the previous day's battle. The older soldier shared his own food, spoke words of encouragement, and stayed by the young man's side through the night. "In my empire," Cale said slowly, "the strong dominate the weak serve or die." "That's not strength," Dr. Young said softly. "That's just fear wearing armor." Through his window, Cale could see the city of Busan rebuilding even. As the war continued, construction crews worked alongside soldiers, repairing damage and caring for refugees. Children played in makeshift playgrounds while their parents stood guard against possible attacks. What struck him most was how humans from different nations, different cultures, had come together to face his invasion. Russian medics worked alongside Korean doctors. American pilots flew beside Japanese squadron leaders. African engineers built defenses with European materials. "Your species is divided," Cale observed. "Our intelligence showed you fighting constant wars among yourselves." Dr. Su laughed, a sound that was somehow both bitter and hopeful. "We do fight among ourselves. We're not perfect. But when something threatens all of us, we remember that we're family." As the days passed, Cale began to understand that humans possessed something his technologically superior empire had lost, a connection to each other that transcended individual survival. They fought not just to win, but to preserve something worth winning for. The revelation was as painful as the bullet wound that had brought him here. His empire had conquered 17 worlds, but they had never truly understood what they were. Destroying. They had mistaken the humans' greatest strength for weakness, and in doing so, had walked into a trap that no amount of superior technology could escape. Sergeant Wu sat by Cale's bedside every morning, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands and a worn tablet displaying the day's security reports. The human soldier had been assigned as Cale's guard, but over the weeks of recovery, something resembling friendship had developed between the two warriors. "Tell me about your wars," Cale asked one morning, his reptilian eyes studying Wu's weathered face. "Our intelligence reports showed your species constantly fighting among yourselves." Wu leaned back in his chair, his expression growing distant. "We have fought many wars. Too many. But we've also faced things much worse than other humans." He activated his tablet, showing Cale images from Earth's history. The first was a map showing massive ice sheets covering most of the northern continents. 70,000 years ago, a supervolcano nearly ended our species. The ash blocked out the sun for years. Most of our ancestors died, but a few thousand survived by working together, sharing whatever food they could find. Cale studied the images with growing fascination. How did so few survive such devastation? They shared everything: food, shelter, knowledge. When one group found a new way to make fire or hunt animals, they taught it to others. Survival became a group effort. Wu swiped to the next image: medieval cities filled with bodies, people fleeing in terror. The Black Death killed 1/3 of Europe's population in just 4 years, but humans adapted. They developed new medical practices, changed how they built cities, learned to work together to prevent future plagues. "Your people seem to face extinction regularly," Cale observed. "Ready. Every few hundred years, something tries to wipe us out." Ice ages, plagues, wars, famines. Each time, we learned something new about survival. Wu's voice carried a note of pride. We're very hard to kill completely. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chief Engineer Hai, a compact woman with oil-stained hands and bright, intelligent eyes. She carried a disassembled human rifle, its parts spread across a maintenance tray. Sergeant Wu asked me to show you something, she said, setting the tray on Kale's bedside table. You mentioned our weapons seem primitive compared to yours. Kale examined the rifle components. Compared to Vorthok plasma technology, the human weapon looked like a child's toy. Your kinetic projectiles cannot penetrate our armor at long range. Hai smiled, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she began reassembling the weapon. That's true, but watch this. She put the rifle together in under 30 seconds, using only basic tools. Then she disassembled it again, this time mixing the parts with components from a broken radio and a damaged tablet. Plasma weapons are powerful, but they need exotic materials, specialized manufacturing facilities, and constant maintenance, she explained while working. This rifle can be built in any machine shop, repaired with common metals, and powered by simple chemical reactions. Within minutes, she had created a functioning weapon using salvaged parts. When you've survived famines by eating tree bark and making tools from scrap metal, you learn that simple things can save your life. Kale watched in amazement as she demonstrated how the rifle could be modified for different purposes: anti-personnel, anti-vehicle, even anti-aircraft with the right ammunition. Your technology is deliberately primitive. Not primitive, Hai corrected. Practical. We design everything to work when you have nothing else. When your fancy equipment breaks down, ours keeps working. Their conversation was interrupted by urgent alarms throughout the medical facility. Through the window, Kale could see new ships. Descending through Earth's atmosphere, the distinctive wedge shapes of Vorthok reinforcement vessels. The hegemony has sent more forces, Kale said, his voice heavy with concern. Wu was already on his radio, receiving updates from the command. Center, 300 ships, sir. They're targeting every major city simultaneously. What happened next shattered every assumption Kale had about human military capability. Instead of panic, he witnessed the most coordinated defense he had ever seen. And the humans didn't just fight back, they fought back together. On the tactical display that Wu brought to his room, Kale watched Russian fighter pilot Alexei coordinating with American squadron leader Maria over the Pacific. They shared targeting data, ammunition, and even aircraft when needed. When Alexei's fighter was damaged, Maria provided cover while he landed on a nearby carrier. Impossible, Kale whispered. Our intelligence said Russia and America were enemies. Have our differences, Wu admitted. But when aliens invade Earth, we're all human first. The coordination extended far beyond individual pilots. Chinese strategist Wei was broadcasting tactical analysis to European commanders in real time. Australian radar stations were feeding targeting information to African missile batteries. South American manufacturing facilities were producing ammunition for Asian defenders. How are you coordinating across such distances? Kale asked, studying the data streams flowing between continents. The internet, Hai explained simply. We've been connected globally for decades. Every human on Earth can communicate with every other human instantly. Kale's mind reeled. The Vorthok Empire controlled 17 worlds, but communication between planets took days or weeks. Humans had created a single, unified communication network that spanned their entire world. President. Kim's voice echoed through speakers throughout the medical facility as he addressed the planet. The human leader stood in what appeared to be a war room surrounded by military officers from dozens of different nations. Citizens of Earth, he began, his voice steady despite the chaos visible through the windows behind him. Today we face an enemy that threatens not just our nations but our species. They believe we will surrender because we are divided. The camera panned across the room, showing Russian generals working alongside American admirals. Chinese technicians coordinating with European scientists. African logistics officers managing supply lines with South American production managers. Are wrong, President Kim continued. We are not divided. We are diverse. Our differences are not weakness, they are strength. Each nation brings unique capabilities to our defense. Together, we are stronger than any single empire. As if to demonstrate his point, the tactical display showed the effectiveness of human coordination. Scandinavian cold weather specialists were advising defenders in Siberia. Desert warfare experts from the Middle East were sharing tactics with Australian forces. Urban combat veterans from every major city were coordinating defense strategies. Have faced extinction before, President Kim said, his voice rising with emotion. Ice ages, plagues, wars, famines. Each time we survived because we stood together. Today, we stand together again. Kale watched through his window as human civilians joined the defense effort. Construction workers were building fortifications. Doctors were treating wounded soldiers regardless of nationality. Engineers were modifying civilian vehicles into weapons platforms. Your empire conquers through force, Wu observed, watching Kale's reaction. But you rule through fear. When crisis comes, fear divides people. We've learned that cooperation is stronger than domination. The most remarkable sight was a group of children in the hospital courtyard. Instead of hiding in terror, they were drawing pictures and writing messages for the defenders. A young girl named Mina had written, "Thank you for protecting us," in 17 different languages. Not afraid, Kale said, his voice filled with wonder. They are afraid, Wu corrected. But they trust us to protect them. That trust makes us stronger than any weapon. As the day wore on, Kale watched his empire's reinforcements meet the same fate as the original invasion force, human fighters. Continued to fly impossible maneuvers, their pilots somehow surviving GI forces that should have been fatal. Ground forces adapted every piece of civilian equipment into weapons of war. Most importantly, the humans fought with a unity that transcended their individual differences. We stand together or we fall apart, President Kim had said. Today, we choose to stand. For the first time in his military career, Commander Kale began to understand that his technologically superior empire had encountered something they had never faced before, a species that had learned to turn survival itself into an art form. The morning sky over Earth turned black as death itself. 300 Vorthok warships emerged from hyperspace, their massive hulls blotting out the sun. Across every continent, each vessel carried enough firepower to level entire cities, and together they represented the full might of an empire that had never known defeat. From his medical wing window, Commander Kale watched the terrifying display of his own fleets. Power. The ships hung in the atmosphere like dark angels of destruction, their weapons charging with ominous energy signatures that made the air itself crackle with electricity. Beautiful, isn't it? Dr. Yang said quietly, joining him at the window. But she wasn't looking at the alien warships. Her eyes were fixed on the human response unfolding below. Across the city of Busan, humans were preparing for what they knew might be their final battle. But there was no panic, no desperate fleeing. Instead, Kale witnessed something that defied everything he understood about warfare. Fighter pilot Ray knelt in the courtyard outside the medical facility, holding her 6-year-old daughter Miri close. The little girl's eyes were wide with fear, but she listened carefully as her mother spoke in gentle tones. "Hey, remember what we talked about, sweetheart? If something happens to me, you go to Uncle Jun's house. He'll take care of you. But I want you to stay with me," Miri whispered, her small hands clutching her mother's flight suit. Ray kissed her daughter's forehead, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. "I have to go protect everyone's children, including you." "That's what we do. We protect what matters most." Kale watched as the pilot handed her daughter to an elderly volunteer who would take her to the underground shelters. As Ray walked toward her fighter, she didn't look back. Her shoulders were straight, her steps steady. She was walking toward almost certain death. She did it with the grace of someone who had found something worth dying for. Near the ammunition depot, Soldier Bin was loading magazines with hands that trembled, not from fear, but from pure determination. His unit had lost half their members in the previous battles, but the survivors worked with mechanical precision. "How many rounds do we have left?" asked his squad leader, Corporal Yang. "Enough," Bin replied, his voice steady. "If we make every shot count, we have enough." Yang nodded, checking his weapon one final time. "Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone who can't fight." In the engineering section, Nay worked frantically on the city's last-ditch defense system. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, her hands moving with desperate efficiency as she wired together a network of improvised weapons. "Will it work?" asked her assistant, a young man named Doc who had volunteered to help despite having no military training. "It has too," Nay replied, sweat beading on her forehead. "Even if it only buys us a few more minutes, those minutes might be enough." Kale's communicator crackled to life, General Vox's voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Commander Kale, are you receiving this transmission?" Kale picked up the device, his scaled fingers hesitating over the controls. "I'm here, General. Excellent. I need you to provide target coordinates for minimal bombardment zones. The humans have fought longer than expected, but it's time to end this charade." Through the window, Kale could see Dr. Young organizing the evacuation of patients who were too sick to move to the deep shelters. She moved with calm efficiency, checking each person personally before they were loaded into transport vehicles. Dr. Kale called out to her, "You should evacuate with the patients." She looked up from her work, her face streaked with exhaustion but still kind. "Someone needs to stay with the patients who can't be moved. That's what we do here." "You'll die," Kale said, the words coming out more emotional than he intended. "Maybe," she replied simply. "But if I run, they'll definitely die. I can't live with that." Kale thought of Sergeant Wu, who had shown him pictures of his family. His wife, his twin sons, his elderly parents. Wu had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment, leading a unit that would try to disable the Vorthok command ship's weapon systems. "Why are you doing this?" Kale had asked him that morning. Wu had smiled, the expression both sad and fierce. "Because my boys need a world to grow up in. If I don't fight for their future, who will?" He remembered Grandmother Park, the elderly woman who had coordinated supplies during the initial invasion. She had insisted on bringing him homemade soup every day during his recovery, treating him like a sick grandson rather than an enemy commander. "You're too thin," she had scolded him just yesterday. "How can you heal properly if you don't eat?" "I am your enemy," Kale had reminded her. "You're hurt and far from home," she had replied. "That makes you my responsibility, Commander Kale." General Vox's voice snapped him back to the present. "I need those coordinates now. We begin final bombardment in 60 seconds. Kale looked at his communicator, then at Dr. Yang, who was now helping an injured child onto a stretcher. He thought of all the humans he had met, their strange kindness, their impossible courage, their refusal to abandon each other even in the face of extinction. "General," he said slowly, "I'm transmitting new intelligence. The humans." "Not what we thought," explain quickly, Commander. "They're not primitive, they're evolved. They've learned something we forgot a long time ago." "What are you talking about?" Kale took a deep breath, making a choice that would change everything. "They know what they're fighting for, and sir, they're going to win. Not because they're stronger, but because they refuse to lose what matters." "You're talking nonsense. Begin bombardment coordinates now?" "No, sir, I won't." The bombardment began anyway, massive plasma beams lancing down from the Vorthok fleet. But instead of random destruction, the humans were ready. Their improvised defense systems activated, redirecting some of the energy, absorbing other attacks with sacrificial structures they had built specifically for this moment. As Vorthok ground forces descended, they found something unprecedented. One of their own commanders fighting alongside the humans Kale had taken. Up a position outside the medical facility, his plasma rifle targeting his former comrades as they tried to breach the building's defenses. "Commander!" shouted Sub-Commander Thex through the smoke. "Ah! What are you doing?" "Something I should have done days ago," Kale replied, firing at a Vorthok assault craft that was targeting the evacuation vehicles. Dr. Young appeared beside him, carrying a human rifle that looked impossibly small in her hands. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," Kale said, reloading his weapon. taught me that some things are worth fighting for. Sergeant Wu and his unit had successfully disabled 2 Vorthok command vessels, but the cost was enormous. Half. The human defenders were casualties, their improvised weapons taking a terrible toll on the technologically superior invasion force. The battle raged for 3 days. In the end, it wasn't superior technology that decided the outcome, it was will. The humans fought with a determination that transcended individual survival. While the Vorthok forces found themselves questioning why they were fighting at all, when General Vox finally ordered the retreat, his fleet had lost nearly a third of its vessels. But more importantly, it had lost something else: the certainty that conquest was always worth the cost. "This is not over," Vox transmitted to the retreating fleet. "Yes, it is," Kale replied from the surface of Earth. "We came here to conquer a primitive species. Instead, we found something we didn't expect, a species that had learned to be stronger together than apart." As the Vorthok fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Kale remained on Earth. He had found his purpose not in conquest, but in protection. He became the first alien ambassador to humanity, helping to bridge the gap between species and ensuring that the lessons learned in Earth's defense would spread throughout the galaxy. Years later, when people asked him what had changed his mind about humans, Kale would always give the same answer: "They taught me that the greatest strength isn't the power to destroy your enemies. It's the courage to protect what you love, even when that love includes your enemies." The war for Earth had ended, but the lesson it taught would echo through the stars for generations to come. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from showing them a better way to live. The end.